The takeover, the Caitlin Clark takeover continues as Caitlin Clark has incredible news ahead of the start of this WNBA season. And we also have to get into Sophie Cunningham not being protected by the Indiana Fever in this.
The takeover continues. March 29th, 2025. Caitlin Clark appears on NBC's Basketball Night in America as a special contributor alongside Carmelo Anthony, Vince Carter, and Tracy McGrady. Not as a guest, as a contributor, analyzing an NBA game between the Knicks and Thunder before her own season even starts. Let that sink in for a second. The WNBA's reigning Rookie of the Year is now providing expert NBA commentary on national television during prime time. This isn't a publicity stunt. This is NBC investing in Caitlin Clark as a media personality beyond just being a player.
Let's get into it. All right. So we got the Caitlin Clark takeover going down, and we also have news on Sophie Cunningham. Now, I put out to you guys that Sophie Cunningham is not going to be protected by the Indiana Fever. I believe the 5 players that will be protected will be Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, Lexi Hall, who's a protected free agent, Kelsey Mitchell, and Michaela Timpson. Those will be the 5 protected players that I believe the Indiana Fever are going to keep. Now, before you all get your you-know-what in a...
But while Caitlin's building her media empire, the Indiana Fever are facing a brutal decision that's about to upset their entire fan base. Sophie Cunningham, the blonde bomber who became a fan favorite in just one season, isn't going to be protected in the expansion draft. And before you lose your mind in the comments, there's actually a legitimate business reason why. The expansion draft rules dropped March 25th. Each team protects 5 players. For Indiana, 4 spots are automatic: Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, Kelsey Mitchell, and Lexi Hull. That 5th spot comes down to Sophie Cunningham versus Michaela Timpson. And here's where it gets complicated.
Not mean the Indiana Fever don't value Sophie Cunningham. This does not mean she won't be back. Okay, let's get into it. Why the Fever are unlikely to protect Sophie Cunningham in the WNBA expansion draft. Here it says the Indiana Fever face an unforgiving situation regarding Sophie Cunningham's future. All right. And shout out to Grant Young, Robin Lundberg, who's also a part of this or whatever, Sports Illustrated. This is courtesy of them. It says it won't be hard for the Indiana Fever fans. It would be hard, it would be hard for the Indiana Fever fans to part ways with Sophie Cunningham. It absolutely would be devastating. We want
Sophie Cunningham is an unrestricted free agent. The Fever can't core her because they're using that designation on Kelsey Mitchell. So even if Indiana protects Sophie in the expansion draft, she can still walk away in free agency and sign anywhere she wants. The Fever would have zero control. Michaela Timpson, on the other hand, is still under contract. She's locked in. If the Fever leave her unprotected and either Toronto or Portland selects her in the expansion draft, she's gone. No negotiation, no second chance. So the question becomes, do you protect a player who might leave anyway, or protect a player you know you'll lose if you don't?
And for stepping in during that Connecticut Sun ambush attack that was taking place on Caitlin Clark. Make no mistake about that. Here it says it earned her notoriety from the women's basketball community and admiration from Fever fans, Caitlin Clark fans. However, the harsh reality is that the WNBA is a business, and as much as everybody wants Cunningham back in Indianapolis, the Fever are between a rock and a hard place right now. Okay? Here, why the Fever protecting Sophie Cunningham doesn't make sense. The rules for the upcoming WNBA expansion draft for the Toronto Temple and Portland Fire were revealed March 25th. As expected, teams will be allowed to protect 5 players.
Now here's the wrinkle that changes everything. According to the expansion draft rules, Toronto and Portland can each only select 1 unrestricted free agent. Just 1. And there are over 100 veterans hitting free agency this offseason. Think about what that means for Sophie Cunningham. If Portland or Toronto uses their 1 unrestricted free agent pick on her, they're required to offer her a veteran supermax contract. That's the rule. And Sophie would absolutely take it because she's not getting that kind of money from Indiana or anyone else on the open market. But here's the thing. Is Sophie Cunningham really a max contract player? Great role player, elite hustle, deadly from 3, fantastic enforcer, but max money? That's franchise cornerstone money.
Also note is that the Fever can only give one core designation to a veteran this offseason and will almost certainly use that on Kelsey Mitchell. Therefore, if one of the two expansion teams were to use their pick on Cunningham and thus give her the veteran Supermax contract, as per the rules, she'll surely take that because she won't be able to get that much money from the Fever or any other team in free agency. And like I said, if Sophie Cunningham gets picked by another team in the expansion draft and they're giving her a Supermax, the Indiana Fever, you were never going to give her that on the open market anyway, so you would lose her regardless. If you court...
The Fever's front office is betting that neither expansion team will use their one precious unrestricted free agent pick on Sophie Cunningham and commit max dollars to her. They're betting she'll clear the expansion draft, hit free agency as planned, and Indiana will have the same opportunity to re-sign her that they would have had anyway. It's a calculated risk, but it's not a lack of respect. This is pure business mathematics. Sport Illustrated broke down the numbers, and they're stark. If the Fever protect Sophie and lose Michaela Timpson in the draft, they're giving up a young player under contract for a veteran they might lose in free agency 2 weeks later anyway. That's not smart roster management.
She still hits the market as a free agent, and if someone offers her a max contract, you can't match it anyway. You got to let her go. So there's no point in you losing a Michaela Timpson if something like that could happen. And the point is, I don't think neither one of these teams are going to pick Sophie Cunningham and give her a max contract to be there. So I think the Indiana Fever will be fine there, and she'll just be hitting the market as an unrestricted free agent, and the Indiana Fever would have the same opportunity to retain her. Okay. Here it says, since Cunningham most likely won't be cored by the Fever, she could also leave Indiana in free agency, even if they decide to protect her.
Remember what Sophie Cunningham brought to Indiana. She stepped in during that Connecticut Sun playoff series when Dejanai Carrington was targeting Caitlin Clark with cheap shots. Sophie didn't back down. She got in faces. She protected her star. Fever fans fell in love with her instantly. 29 years old, missed significant time with injuries, but when she was healthy, she provided exactly what this team needed: toughness, three-point shooting, and a willingness to be the bad guy. That's valuable. That's worth keeping. But is it worth losing Michaela Timpson over? That's where the Fever are drawing the line.
Match any offer that's given to Lexi Hall. So that's the difference in those two and why you want to protect Sophie Cunningham in the expansion draft and keep those rights at least, okay? Here it says, if they decide to protect her, this means the Fever will be protecting somebody who essentially can't control, regardless of whether she's selected by an expansion team. That's a risk Indiana Fever's front office would be wise not to take, especially since Timpson is still under contract with the team and would surely be selected if unprotected. If Michaela Timpson's unprotected, she's going to get picked. Okay, one optimistic potential outcome is that neither expansion team selects her. They can select one unrestricted free agent after all, and Cunningham then decides to return to the Indiana Fever in free agency. But the hope...
Let's talk about Michaela Timpson for a second, because she's getting lost in all the Sophie Cunningham drama. Timpson was a rookie in 2025, still developing, still under team control, still on a cost-controlled contract. If the Fever leave her unprotected, she will get selected, guaranteed. Young talent on a rookie deal is exactly what expansion teams target. Toronto and Portland aren't stupid. They're not passing up a controllable asset for a 30-year-old role player they have to max out. So the Fever's calculation is simple: protect the young player we control, let the veteran hit the market, and hope we can bring her back at a reasonable price.
Draft. So, there is a chance that the Indiana Fever could lose Sophie Cunningham on the open market, because if somebody jumps out the window and say, hey, we got $950K for you, I don't believe the Indiana Fever can pay her that much. They might top out at $600, $650. And she's not going to take $300-some thousand less to stay with the Indiana Fever. I wouldn't advise anybody to take a $300,000 per year pay cut. But I think the Indiana Fever have an awesome shot at retaining Sophie Cunningham once she hits the open market. I don't believe either one of these teams will select her in the expansion draft and want to give her a max.
Now here's where this gets interesting. While all this roster drama is unfolding, Stephanie White, the Fever's head coach, is out doing NCAA tournament commentary. She's on TV breaking down college games instead of focusing on who the team should protect in the expansion draft. And honestly, that tells you everything you need to know about how the Fever view this decision. It's already made. The front office knows exactly what they're doing. Stephanie White doesn't need to be in war room meetings because there's no debate happening. Caitlin, Aaliyah, Kelsey, Lexi, Michaela, that's the 5. Sophie hits the market, they try to bring her back. End of story.
Shoot the 3, but she's not a max player, so I don't see the Portland Fire or Toronto Tempo completely jumping out the window to give her that kind of contract. So I believe the Indiana Fever will have a great opportunity to retain her on the open market. Get down in the comments and let me know what you guys think. This is Keep the Vision. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and share the channel.
But let's get back to Caitlin Clark and this NBC opportunity, because this is actually a massive development that people are glossing over. March 29th, Basketball Night in America. She's sitting next to 3 NBA Hall of Famers, providing expert analysis on a Knicks Thunder game. This isn't a WNBA player doing a cute crossover appearance. This is NBC positioning Caitlin Clark as a legitimate basketball analyst who can speak credibly about the men's game. That's a completely different level of mainstream acceptance. Carmelo Anthony, Vince Carter, Tracy McGrady, and Caitlin Clark. One of these names is not like the others, and yet NBC is presenting them as equals in the analyst chair. That's respect. That's also strategic investment in Caitlin's post-playing career, which is wild considering she just finished her rookie season.
The first 4 players are obvious for Indiana: Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, Lexi Hall, and Kelsey Mitchell. Most agree that the 5th option should be between Cunningham and Michaela Timpson, who was a rookie in 2025. However, a wrench in the expansion draft rules is that Toronto and Portland can only select one upcoming unrestricted free agent. Since there are over 100 veterans who will become free agents, this limits their options.
Here's what makes this significant. The WNBA season hasn't even started yet. Caitlin Clark is still technically in her off-season. And instead of just training and preparing, she's building a media brand that exists completely independent of whether she's on the court or not. Compare that to how other WNBA stars have been positioned. Aja Wilson does commercials. Brianna Stewart does endorsements, but Caitlin Clark is doing NBA analysis on NBC's premier basketball show. That's a different stratosphere of mainstream visibility. And it's not like she's unqualified. Caitlin Clark knows basketball. She grew up studying the game. She can break down pick-and-roll coverage, defensive rotations, offensive spacing. She's not just there because she's famous. She's there because she can actually do the job. But the optics are fascinating. While her teammates are grinding through off-season workouts and the Fever front office is navigating expansion draft complications, Caitlin's on national television analyzing Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and the Thunder. The gap between her platform and everyone else's platform just keeps growing.
I believe the 5 players that will be protected will be Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, Lexi Hall, who's a protected free agent, Kelsey Mitchell, and Michaela Timpson. Those will be the 5 protected players that I believe the Indiana Fever are going to keep. Now, before you all get your you-know-what in a...
Now let's connect these 2 stories because they're more related than they appear. The Fever are about to lose Sophie Cunningham, their enforcer, the player who protected Caitlin Clark when things got physical. And Caitlin's response is to go build her brand on NBC. That's not a criticism, that's just reality. Caitlin Clark understands that her value extends far beyond what happens on the court in Indianapolis. She's a media property now. NBC knows it, the WNBA knows it, and the Fever definitely know it. So when the front office makes the cold, calculated decision to let Sophie Cunningham go unprotected, they're not worried about Caitlin throwing a fit or demanding they keep her enforcer. Because Caitlin's focus is already elsewhere. She's thinking bigger. The Fever protect their core. Caitlin, Aaliyah, Kelsey, Lexi, Michaela. Everyone else is expendable, and Caitlin's fine with that because she's building something that transcends roster construction. Think about the timeline here. Sophie Cunningham became a fan favorite specifically because she protected Caitlin during the playoffs. Fans loved seeing someone willing to get physical on Caitlin's behalf. And now, less than 6 months later, the Fever are letting her walk. That should be controversial. That should cause tension. But it's not, because everyone involved understands the business. Sophie knows she's hitting free agency. Caitlin knows the team has to make tough choices. The front office knows they can't protect everyone. It's professional sports. Sentiment doesn't factor into roster decisions. What's interesting is how the fan base is going to react. Fever fans fell hard for Sophie Cunningham, the blonde bomber, the three-point sniper, the enforcer who had Caitlin's back. Watching her potentially end up in Toronto or Portland is going to sting. But here's the optimistic scenario the Fever are banking on. Sophie clears the expansion draft because neither team wants to use their one unrestricted free agent pick on a 29-year-old role player they have to max out. She hits the open market. Indiana offers her a reasonable contract. She re-signs because she loves playing with Caitlin and the team is a championship contender. That's the best case outcome, and honestly, it's pretty likely. Toronto and Portland are going to use their unrestricted picks on younger players with higher upside. Sophie Cunningham is great, but she's not the kind of player you build a franchise around. She's the kind of player you add to a contender, which is exactly what Indiana is. So the Fever let her go unprotected. She clears waivers and they bring her back in free agency at a price that makes sense. Everyone wins. The fans get their enforcer back. Sophie gets paid fairly, the team keeps Michaela Timpson, and Caitlin keeps building her empire on NBC. Meanwhile, Stephanie White is analyzing college games on TV, completely unbothered by any of this drama, because again, the decision is already made. There's no internal debate. The front office knows what they're doing. And that's actually reassuring if you're a Fever fan. This isn't chaos. This isn't panic. This is calculated roster management by a front office that understands the expansion draft rules and is making strategic decisions based on contract status and team control. They're protecting the players they can't afford to lose. They're letting the market determine Sophie Cunningham's value, and they're trusting that their status as a championship contender will be enough to bring her back. Now, could this backfire? Absolutely. If Portland decides Sophie Cunningham is worth a max contract and selects her in the expansion draft, she's gone. The Fever lose their enforcer, their three-point shooting, and a massive fan favorite. That would be a disaster. But the odds of that happening are low, really low, because Portland would be using their one unrestricted free agent pick on a player who missed significant time with injuries last season and is on the wrong side of 30. That's not smart team building for an expansion franchise. So the Fever are playing the percentages, and the percentages say Sophie Cunningham will be available in free agency, and Indiana will have a real shot at bringing her back. The question is, what's her market value? If another team offers her significantly more money than the Fever are willing to pay, she walks, and Indiana has to live with that decision. But if the market treats her as a quality role player worth solid money but not max money, the Fever can match that. And Sophie gets to stay in Indianapolis, keep playing with Caitlin Clark, and compete for championships. That's the bet Indiana is making. It's not personal. It's not disrespectful. It's just business. And in professional sports, business always wins. So here's what happens next. The expansion draft takes place. Sophie Cunningham goes unprotected. Toronto and Portland pass on her because they don't want to commit max money. She hits free agency. Indiana makes her a competitive offer. She weighs her options, and most likely she comes back. The Fever keep their core intact. Caitlin continues her takeover on NBC and everywhere else. Stephanie White finishes her NCAA commentary gig and gets back to coaching. And the 2026 WNBA season starts with Indiana as a legitimate championship contender. Unless Portland decides to blow everything up and max out Sophie Cunningham, then all of this analysis goes out the window and the Fever look foolish. But that's not happening. So mark it down. Sophie Cunningham will be back in Indianapolis next season. The Fever will keep Michaela Timpson, and Caitlin Clark will keep taking over everything she touches. The takeover continues. Can't stop, won't stop. And the Indiana Fever are betting their entire expansion draft strategy on that reality. So what do you think? Is the Fever front office making the right call by leaving Sophie Cunningham unprotected? Or are they about to lose a fan favorite and regret it all season? Drop your take in the comments. And if you want more WNBA analysis that actually breaks down the business side of these decisions, hit subscribe, because this league is only getting more complicated from here.